Welcome to SplunkTalk, a Splunk podcast that's all Splunk and no junk. I'm your host, Birch, here with co-host Hal. This is season 2, episode 10, and we'll soon be joined by Patrick Pablo. But before we go any further, let's check in. Hal?
Hi, Birch. How's it going?
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. So you made it through the intro, despite me changing my virtual background. Thoughts?
I know. I enjoyed the challenge. I mean, it's just you didn't change it to anything that could have been visually distracting, so I was all set.
For those listeners to the audio only, basically Star Wars hyperspace animation behind my head right now.
Yeah, it's intense.
So I'll relax that one just a little bit so that we can actually, You're
going to come out of hyperspace?
I'm going to come out of hyperspace. Well, now you're making me like overthinking. I'm like, okay, well, where am I going to land?
Oh,
this will do.
What system is that?
I don't know that one off the top of my head. If it were like the Horsehead Nebula or something, then I would have said, it's the Horsehead Nebula, but I didn't think.
Well, it's Splunk, so it would have to be the Ponyhead Nebula.
I mean, I've got options. I got a lot of space options.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
Anyway.
Speaking of space, I have been spending every 2 weeks, I've been watching one of the Star Wars movies with a friend of mine over Zoom. And I never thought we'd actually be in quarantine long enough to watch all the movies. But lo and behold, it looks like we're getting there.
Oh, yeah. That's
We've
lovely.
got 2 left. We did...
Did you really? Which order? Did you use machete order?
No, well, kind of.
Okay. A modified machete? Chronological?
So we did them in perceived quality order.
Oh, okay.
So it was The Last Jedi. That's 8, right? And then the most recent one, Rise of Skywalker.
Okay. You started there. Okay.
Yeah.
Started with 8 and 9. Okay.
And then went to Solo.
Okay.
But then decided to cap off the side movies with Rogue One.
Now, I really liked
No. I'm sorry. We didn't do Rogue One then, because then we went A New
Did you do
Hope.
the Muppet special?
No.
Okay.
No, but we did do Rogue One. So in terms of like quality, we were kind of grouped together all the ones that we personally weren't very fond of. Okay. Although, episode 1's getting a whole new life breathed into it thanks to Dave Fillion, the heir apparent of Star Wars.
Okay. I'm not caught up on that particular development. Yeah,
so we did 1, then 2, then 3, then Rogue One, then 4, then 5. We've got 6, and then we'll do The Force Awakens.
Okay, that is an odd order for sure.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you heard of it, and I don't remember if I can do the whole thing, but the machete order.
I used to do that one.
You have? Yeah, okay. Yeah. It's basically, skip a couple of the prequels.
Right. Well, it's 4, 5, and so now you learn
and never 3
no
something like that.
4, 5, 2, 3, 6.
Okay, skipping 1. That's what it was.
Skipping 1 entirely, but not letting you hear any of the backstory of Anakin until you get the reveal about why that matters in 5.
Yep.
Yeah. So again, all Splunk, no junk.
It's midichlorians, man.
Hey, have we talked about your new role? Do you want to?
I would cut a little bit. So when I started at Splunk 8.5 some odd years ago, I was a builder of things, a solution architect. I was taking things and mashing them together and creating integrations and apps, and that was cool.
I believe that part of your career is referred to as when I was a young warthog.
I could actually sing that song in tune, by the way. I don't know that we ever discussed that. Maybe not now.
I think that's all our listeners want right now is a little Hakuna Matata.
Okay. Just if you keep going, then I'm going to anyway. So then I was a developer evangelist.
It means no worries.
Oh, come on.
A developer evangelist.
Oh, yeah. I was a developer evangelist for a little while, and that was a fun role. And then I did that for about a year. And then I was a specialist in our IT markets group. I did a bunch of DevOps stuff. That was cool. I mean, all my jobs were cool. I like enjoyed each of these things. And then I became an SE, so a pre-sales engineer. Did that for 3.5 years. And then my newest role as of just a couple months ago or so is, let's see, the full title is a little bit, it's Global Sales Engineering Director of Technical Interlock for Core. So yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful, but basically, it's kind of building programs and helping us to do what we do better. So
nice
strategy, and just kind of making kind of taking a higher view of what it is that we do in the SE land and try to make it better. So I'm liking it. It's fun.
Speaking of making things better, this recording just got better because Patrick just joined us.
We have a guest.
And Patrick has some cool stories to tell us about making things better. But I also want to hear all about your background and time here at Splunk. Patrick, can you give us a little bit about who you are? What should our listeners know about you?
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Patrick Pablo. I've been at Splunk for 6 years. I just passed my 6-year anniversary beginning of June. So I started in 2014. I was hired on by the very first director of community, Rachel Perkins. She created community at Splunk.
I think her name comes up every episode now.
She is a legend for sure. And, I definitely have many thanks to her for just where my career path has gone and how much it's grown to where it is today. I don't know if there's a good handful of folks that know this, but I actually used to be a college and career counselor before I came to Splunk. So this was completely like left field for me. I didn't know anything about Splunk. I didn't know anything about the world of data. And I just learned everything from scratch. And it was very scary to me, honestly. I met, the reason why I came to Splunk is as a college and career counselor, I was helping a coworker with a middle school career day. And, there were over 30 professionals from different companies, industries, speaking to middle school kids about how, just to learn about just the different opportunities that are out there outside of being a doctor or lawyer or dentist. And Rachel was there talking about her job at Splunk. And I was in charge of moderating the classroom to make sure students were behaving and engaging and asking good questions. She, after her presentation, I remember going up to her and not trying to find a new job. I was just like, hey, I was like, I loved hearing about your what you do. It sounds like what I do, similar, but just a different industry. And then she just handed me her email and she's like, oh, we should talk sometime. And I never thought anything of it for like about a week. And then it hit me. I'm like, it's not going to hurt for me to learn about something completely, unfamiliar to me, and I think it'd be cool to just kind of pick her brain about things. So I actually met up with her at the Splunk office at 250 Brannan.
It was a trap.
I know, it totally was a trap, right? And
it's a trap.
And it was, I remember, I've never been inside like a tech company really at that point. Well, actually I lied. I have been to Google because my sister works at Google, but I went in there and I actually drafted up 25 questions that I wanted to ask her the night before. And we just sat on a couch. And she actually brought Christopher Gales to the conversation too, since, Rachel used to be the director of documentation and Chris took things over. So I just had a chat with the both of them and I just asked them my 25 questions about Splunk and how they got there.
You got through all 25 questions?
I think I did. I think in conversation, she kind of just hit on a bunch of things already, so I was just crossing things off the list. So I didn't need to ask literally all 25.
Have a list?
I did have a list.
That's awesome.
You were like, "Hi, nice to meet you. How are you doing today?" And then she was like, "I'm doing great, and also the weather is great." And you're like, "Cool, that's one, and that's number two." Okay.
Exactly. I had all my bases covered. But, it's the conversation went really well. And at the end of it, she was like, I'd love to get your resume if you're interested in this summer internship opportunity. And, I happened to update my resume the night before just in case, and I pulled it out immediately. And I remember Chris Gale saying, nice. "Oh, he's good." he came prepared. Yeah. And next thing I knew, she set me on phone interviews with 2 other colleagues, one from support and a product manager who ended up joining the community team later that year. And that's pretty much how my career started at Splunk, learning everything from scratch.
Awesome. So what is it that, what are the areas of what does community mean, to the company and the areas that you're responsible for? Yeah.
It's very interesting to me because I came from a background of doing community building and organizing, not around an enterprise company and a software, but just identity-based groups, especially throughout college, and even in my job as a college and career counselor, I was building community amongst the students and families, and empowering students to try to figure out why they should be going to different colleges and universities or other forms of post-secondary education. And coming to Splunk, I was like, what does community mean at a software company? Like, that's how completely new I was to this idea of community management as a career and its own industry. And so when I came to Splunk, honestly, I was just kind of taking things in as they came. I was like, cool, let me just learn the basics about Splunk, and start diving into Splunk Answers, our technical Q&A forum. And really, that's where I started to see the beauty and the value of community for organizations, where people are just helping each other out. No, they're not being asked to do this. People that just love the technology, they love the product, they love us as a brand, as a company, and it just got really great vibes seeing people want to share all their years of expertise and knowledge that they've built up with using our product for real world use cases over time, and then applying that to getting people to the same level that they're at, because I think back then, something that was said very often was, how do we get people to have that aha moment with Splunk, right? Where it's just like, oh, what is this like really complex, seemingly complex product? And there's some other tools out there that we use. Why should I choose Splunk over something else? But then when you have that expert out there that's like, oh, trust me, I was where you were maybe like 2, 3, 4 years ago. But once I really got my hands into it and got to play around with it more, and I broke it several times, fixed it several times, and developed these best practices that they can spin up a Splunk deployment just like that. Like when they can get other people to that same level of understanding and excitement, it's like, oh wow, this is great, and it converts people to understand, to want to choose Splunk over other solutions that are out there. And I think it's just cool that there's this organic relationship building and energy that kind of thrives off of. People thrive off of one another, and it was just great to see just real relationships being built, right? Is people only know each other via username. It's not like they're getting to see each other in person all the time. But then when we go to .conf every year, and I remember my first .conf, I knew everyone's usernames because I literally read 100% of every single question that came into the forum, every single answer, every single comment.
Wow, superhero.
Yeah, and that's really how I learned Splunk. I was reading questions from people who were equally as clueless as me, but I was reading experts' answers all the time. So even though I wasn't using Splunk for my day job, I was just reading about these solutions and real working solutions for people all the time. And so that's kind of how I've absorbed all of my Splunk knowledge. And when I went to .conf, and this is a time too where they still used to show, Splunk Answers usernames on badges. Mm-hmm. And so I'd meet people and shake hands, and then I'd look down at their badge. I'm like, oh, I know who you are. And there's like, wait, why do you know who I am? I'm like, oh, I'm that one dude that's just floating around in Splunk Answers. And they're like, oh, you're that guy that makes my post more understandable to other people. I was like, yes, that was me. And it's funny because I always questioned myself when I came to Splunk, and I didn't understand more than half of the things I was reading usually to start, so I'd have to do my own research in Splunk documentation, look at other Splunk answers, look at other things that people have posted on the web about Splunk, just to make sure I understood what I was reading and how I could optimize it for search for other people to find the same solutions. And I think it was just really cool to be in a position where I could still contribute to community, to Splunk, and at the same time learn at the same time.
Well, not only did you contribute, but that turned into an honor, I think, this past year or the year before, right? Where you made an honorary trust member?
Oh, yeah. So, this past .conf 19 in Vegas, it was a surprise to me because no one told me. And there was this induction ceremony that happens for the trust at every .conf, usually on that Monday night.
And you're there because it's your crew. You didn't know that you were getting anything?
Well, that's the thing. I wasn't even in the room because there was things happening at different times. So I was actually on the Source Pavilion and the expo floor, just helping to staff our community booth. And then suddenly I get like a text message, but I didn't see it like right away until someone ran up to me and they're like, you're needed somewhere. And I was like, wait, what? And then they just told me to run to some other room, and I'm like, okay. So I just like dropped whatever I was doing, because apparently my name was called as an honorary Splunk Trust member in this other room where they were doing their award ceremony. And then everyone looked around the room. They're like, where's Patrick? And my manager at the time was like, oh, I don't think anyone told him he was supposed to be here. So it was fun. I ended up making it towards the end, and it was interesting because I was like, oh, I didn't even know I would be eligible for that, just because I thought, I work for the Splunk community team, and I was like, what I do for the community and like what I do for the Splunk Trust folks is like, I just do that just because I want to, honestly, and it's not. I never really think of it as something as me going above and beyond, but it's just like, oh, the community is who I care about.
We had Jason on recently, and he talked a little bit about that. And the funny thing about technical community and like, you, me, Birch, we've all been doing this for a long time as either a part of our jobs or most likely not even part of our jobs, right? It's just the way we are. Is that it's this realization that, hey, we're building something. It's technical. Yeah, it's enterprise software. Quote unquote, how boring could it be? But no, it's like we're building this stuff for humans. And, we have all these, needs that we're bringing with us to, this area that we all find interesting. And it's like everybody gets together. We all find the same thing. Yeah, cool. There's like friendships that happen. There's, kind of an amplification. So it's like we're all kind of realizing this stuff, at an early age, years ago, doing something else. And we're just bringing that with us. Yeah. So I think it's kind of like that like-minded spirit, kind of you take it wherever you go. So you probably had it, in your previous job. Rachel saw that and she was like, yeah, that's the kind of thing that we need here. And the trustees, they were like, yeah, he helps us do that even better. So
yeah,
it's a good
I think it's funny that like in this podcast, I feel like we seem to only talk about the same like 5 people. Like we had Chris on, we had Jason on, we talk about Rachel. Like,
well, you could see
we're gonna think this company is like maybe 20 people big still.
We probably should branch out just a little bit next time.
Yeah,
we'll have to
let's start name dropping other people.
Name dropping other people. Okay, what's a good name I could drop? Because if you do that, then we got to have that person on.
Well, it's like Beetlejuice, so it means we summon them.
Jeff Blake. Okay. So Jeff Blake was one of the cohorts of Wild back there in the early days of the podcast. So I think we definitely need to talk to Jeff Blake, see what he's up to.
We'll add him to the list. So Patrick, tell us about the recent developments. There's a timeliness to your appearance on the podcast right now.
Yeah.
Before you do that, can I say to Birch, we got to work on your segues, man.
Should they like rock back and forth as I lean and I can move around the city on them and people will look at me oddly?
That was my goal. So please do tell us about the updates in the community. But before you do that, I would like to ask actually, tell us about kind of the evolution of the Answers platform and why it came about, and then you can kind of get to where we are today.
Yeah. So the old platform we're on was called Answer Hub, and we'd actually been with that platform for 11 years, since 2009. So that was actually like 5 years before I started working at Splunk.
And I'm not asking you to bash the old platform.
No, yeah.
It's just the Q&A platform concept.
Right. And I think it's just as we've grown as a company, I think just we really needed to think more deeply about the community's experience. So, we talked about community programs. We talk about Splunk Answers over here, user groups over here. We have Slack over here, but it didn't really feel like a very cohesive community experience. Like it didn't really feel like there was one central place where it's like, where can I find all things community, and regardless of where I am,
like it was a bunch of like disparate solutions.
Yeah.
Okay.
And disparate solutions that had their fair share of issues that we wanted to address and hopefully improve for our users' experience over time. And so we started looking at community platforms that could really bring that all together in one place, because we thought, how awesome would it be, if we have these forums, but if we can have user groups have their own forums so they can connect with their members, because that's something that we've always heard about, as a big ask from people, is like, it would be great if there could be some sort of collaboration space for us to build community amongst our members that's not just in Slack where backscroll disappears after some time, or or we only get to see each other in person once a month or every other month or quarterly. How can we continue some interesting conversations and discussions, or how can we have some long-standing resources for new members as they join the groups? And so it was pretty interesting going through the whole RFP process, looking at different community solutions out there, because
what's
honestly,
RFP stand for?
Oh my goodness.
I think request for proposals.
Request for proposals is right. Yeah. So, we got, we actually did, RFP process, and there were, I think, 3 vendors that we ended up making to the final rounds based on the requirements that we set on what we would like to see in, the future of our community platform and the capabilities.
So just building on my question. So was the process like for people that aren't familiar with an RFP process, like you say, okay, these are all the requirements or all the things that I want, and like vendors out there, like the gates are open, come court us and show us your wares and see if you align with those things. Okay.
Yeah. And it was interesting, over the past several years, there have been different vendors here and there that have tried to reach out to us like, hey, you have like a growing community. We'd love to, get in a conversation with you. But, at those times, like, we didn't really have the resources to be able to just make a switch to a new technology before. But it was more so in the past year and a half where we've really seen a lot of great changes and investment in community. And it was the opportune time to really start the process middle of last year. And going towards the end of the RFP process at the end of 2019, that's when we really started honing in on, two possible vendors that we thought would be a good fit for what we needed for the future of our community, and we ended up choosing one, and that was. That was Koros, and out of the box, of course, any platform, nothing was going to be perfect. Like, the thing is, with our old platform, it was so highly customized. So imagine 11 years of just all these different one-off customizations to create this a certain experience for our users on that platform. But unfortunately, there wasn't a really great upgrade path for us to sustain the platform that was usable for everyone. And so moving to this new
like the underlying engine was like we had like I'm picturing like we forked off from like the main code base to the point that like getting back on that main path to like upgrade to a more modern thing, right? Because all these platforms over time start to feel antiquated. The user experience really starts to drag compared to the innovations that have come out there.
Some technical debt.
Yes.
Yeah. We were just way out there, and now there was, even if we did that, it would have been an uplift just the same as moving elsewhere. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, we were able to find something that was going to allow us to integrate other areas of our community that would make it a lot more of a seamless experience. And so we're actually in the works of trying to, connect our user group site to the new platform so we can actually have that back and forth discovery of user groups, right? So unless people know about the user groups website, they might not necessarily know that there's a local Splunk user group in the area, and like, oh, I could connect with other local Splunk customers in the area and kind of pick their brains about how they're using it and see how I can bring that to my organization and solve these additional problems I didn't know we had, for one. And so being able to see user groups within this community hub where people are already going to for Splunk answers, and like, oh, there's user groups, and oh, there's one in my area. They can join. Ideally, we should be able to join from there, and then they would talk to each other. So if I join in the Splunk community site, I'm already a member of the group in the user group site, right, and vice versa. But yeah.
How that inspires a tangential question, but I mean, I know you're active with the user groups as well. How have you seen? Tell us about the adjustments made. What with social distancing? It looks like the user groups didn't miss a beat.
Yeah, and I think that's. I think that really speaks to the leaders of the groups, right? It's like they were like, you know what, even though we have to shelter in place, we have technology and let's use it to still continue to build these connections and keep things going. And to be honest, same thing, right? I think for all of us, right? I've never thought I'd be able to work from home 100% of the time. I was like, oh, I would never in my life be able to do that, right? But then you get forced into this situation where it's like, oh, we have no choice and we have to adapt and adjust. And I think that really like pushes us to grow and to think of solutions to new challenges. And I think the same thing happened with user groups, right? And it has a lot to do with the people that are passionate about continuing to build these communities, regardless of whether you're physically together with each other in one space or making it 100% virtual. But the thing that's been really cool with making it 100% virtual to adapt to the global pandemic is people can join user groups from anywhere around the world. Like, you're not just confined to, oh, I'm only in Atlanta, Georgia, and I can only go to that user group. But it's like, oh, there's a user group over in Honolulu, and hey, I have a free slot. It looks like their meeting is starting now. Why don't I just hop on Zoom, and you can learn some cool Splunk stuff, and you never had to travel thousands of miles just to get there and experience the same learning that other people do in that area.
And I bet it affords the ability to get like guests that would otherwise have been like cost prohibitive to get. What were you going to say, Hal?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in that role before. Leading the user group in Atlanta and working to try and get a speaker to come to Atlanta. It's possible. It's definitely doable, especially in some metro areas, but it takes a lot of work. And you're basically taking someone, out of their, the travel commitment. That's a huge deal. So this might make it easier to get speakers to participate in different areas.
Yeah.
And just kind of funny, like while we were talking about it, I had just happened to click over to user groups and was thinking, wow, that's interesting. You know what? I'm going to click the button. Oh, that's actually a convenient time. And I've actually RSVP'd into one, that's happening.
See, it's working.
So
the new platforms are working.
Patrick was doing the Jedi mind trick. It's like while he was saying, and you can just find any that are starting now and you can join them. And Hal was like, yes, I will do that. Yes, I will do that while we were talking.
Yeah. And the thing that's pretty cool. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but the user groups platform changed in April too. So we were actually on this platform, the old site that was built in-house since 2015, I believe, and before you didn't even
that's
have.
one I might actually bash.
Yes, and so yeah, it was really sad because honestly, like that took up hours of my life. I think in like 2017 to 2018, I was just like, oh my gosh, like I feel like I'm managing and troubleshooting and bug reporting for this technology. That's not my job. I'm a community manager. I should be helping to build and develop a community, not work as this QA person and like doing all this like other. I felt like I was just wearing so many different hats that I shouldn't have had to during that phase. And so what's really nice is even something as simple as going to the user group site and already seeing what are all the upcoming meetings in chronological order, and regardless of where they are, you already could identify like, oh cool, like being able to see other groups events queued up is something so simple as that we didn't have before, and that makes a big difference.
And we're a data company, and I don't know if you're prepared to talk to this. That's okay if not. But do you have any metrics on and like how the different sites have been or are used, and as far as like number of answers or number of participants in different parts of the site?
Yeah. So, actually, we just, I'm trying, hopefully I can remember all the numbers off the top of my head because we actually presented this to our marketing group yesterday.
The good thing here is it's like what people told me at my bar mitzvah. You could be wrong and no one's going to know.
Well, yeah. So I think there were over or about 100 user group meetings, I think, since the user group site changed in April. So I think globally there are about 100.
When you say changed, it moved over to the new Khoros platform?
No, so the user group site's actually a different platform called Bevy. Yeah. So it's a user group specific platform, and so that there were about 100 meetings, I believe, since it launched. So user group meetings globally. There are, I think, 3 to 4 new user groups within, I think, the past 2 weeks. There were like 3 or 4 new user groups in India that just started, and they're the first user groups ever in that region. There's one new one in Czech Republic, and I think there are a couple new ones in the United States as well. So I think there are 9 new user groups that started up within the past 2 weeks.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I believe since the migration to the new Bevy site, there's been an increase in 1,200 new members on the user group site. So 1,200 new folks have joined local user groups around the world within that time. And then for Splunk Answers, we'd actually, for the past couple quarters, had hovered around 1.8 million page views per month. And since after the first 30 days of moving to the new Khoros platform, we've actually broke over 2 million for the first time, which is pretty awesome. There were over 4,000 posts within those 30 days after, so including new questions and replies, about 300 solutions, so like 300 accepted answers on the site. I believe there's one other metric in there that I can't remember.
That's okay
right now, but yeah.
So, what do you think? I mean, what's the most impact, or what is your favorite area of these different sites, and what's kind of been like your favorite thing to track and see grow over time?
Yeah, I think for the user group site, anyways, like there's actually analytics in an analytics dashboard that we as leaders can see for our own groups. Like we never had that before. So just being able to see the number of people that are RSVPing versus the number of people that actually attended. And what's really cool is there's a check-in feature. So as members show up on your Zoom meetings, you can just check people off so you can see how many people are actually attending versus RSVPing. Since I think it's roughly about like 50%, I think, actual attendance according to the number of RSVPs, but it's kind of hit or miss, kind of depending on the season and also the topic. So just being able to have immediate insight into those numbers in the platform right away has been pretty awesome. And I think for the new Khoros site, I feel like there's just a lot more admin capabilities that we had that we've never had in before. So there there's been, emails coming in from different users that might have maybe there's some like hiccup that they had with their account, or maybe with the migration from Answers to the new site, I think it didn't sync up with their existing account that was moved over. And
I don't know anyone who had that.
Right. Merch is one of them. And, I think before we'd have to go through a whole support ticket process with the vendor, kind of twiddle our thumbs and wait until they could make some changes on the back end from their side. But for us as admin, I was able to just go in there, and users that have been emailing about these issues are like, oh my goodness, what a quick turnaround. Like, that was amazing. Thank you so much for the customer experience and support. I'm like, yeah. And I'm just thankful that I actually have more capabilities to help users out if they have any issues with the platform.
I think that's what makes you so effective in your job, if I do say, and flatter you, hopefully, is I just feel like the word choice you use, it shows that for you, being able to do something like that, it's not about like, oh, cool, I have more control and I can do more nifty things. For you, it's like, oh, a user is trying to do something, and when I can't help them with a fast response, I emote. Like you actually feel bad for them. And so the way you said that was like, yeah, now I can like get them on their way right away. And they're like, whoa, that was really fast. And it was just like, there was a tone in the way you said it that it made clear that like, you're so passionate about this, that you feel for the user's frustration when they're having it. I think that's part of what makes you receive the high honors of, hey, do you want to come in for an intern program? And boy, you're prepared, and all the way to, now you're Splunk Trust honoree and all of that.
Yeah. It's I think that's just kind of been like my nature. I feel like I always like want to help people, right? Like, it's interestingly, I was supposed to. My parents were very disappointed in when I first went to college, and I changed my major from computer science to sociology. Actually,
how interesting how it came full circle.
Yes, and I remember having this conversation with my mom. She's like, "Why did you leave computer science in a technical area of study? Like, you're so good at math, right?" And I remember hearing that a lot from her. But then I remember I came to a realization. I was like, "Yeah, I'm good at math, but I enjoy helping people with math more so than me doing math like myself, I guess." And that's when I started kind of thinking like, oh yeah, I just and I started really developing that sense of self and like, what is it that gets me going? And it's like, oh, I love helping people. I love building community with folks around something that we're all very passionate about. And the same thing too, I feel like I brought that with me when I came to Splunk, and it's like, how do I bring that passion and that drive for wanting to help people connect with each other and get the support that they need to be successful with whatever it is that they want to do.
Would you describe yourself as like an extreme extrovert?
No, actually, I'm actually very much an introvert. And it was very interesting because even in college, like, I didn't learn public speaking really until I went to Cal. And that's actually how I ended up in college and career counseling. Is I was part of student organizations that went out to local high schools and community colleges and spoke to students about all the different post-secondary options that were out there. And I remember standing in front of like classrooms with my hands like shaking and looking at a paper and reading things verbatim because I just didn't have enough confidence in being able to, in the material or whatever I was presenting on. But over time, I was like, oh wow, I'm getting a lot more comfortable and confident in being able to do this. But I was like, does that mean I'm becoming an extrovert, or have I always been an extrovert this entire time? But then I started really kind of just like thinking to myself, I talked to, I don't know if you all know V-Raptor or Nadine Miller, right? And a lot of other folks too. I think even folks like Rachel, we always talked about how when we need to be on, we can be on, but it does expend a lot of social and mental energy. And then same thing for .conf, right? Like I feel like I'm on 12 to 14 hours straight a day.
You probably sleep really well.
Yeah. And then I need to go back to my hotel room. I was like, I need to shut things off and I need to recharge my social energy to be able to expend for the next day. Because I think, with shelter in place, like it was, I mean, has been hard and also not so hard just because I'm like, yeah, I've always been a video gamer. Like I can play for hours on end. I love like enjoying that time to just spend and do my own thing and do problem solving in a different world. But it's, yeah, I feel like I'm an introverted extrovert. Yeah. I'm an introvert.
Well, it's really
we're in the field, so this is working from home. This is like second nature.
Yeah,
but it is really interesting because you would think like I'm sure there are listeners out there who are hearing, and there might be some young people in college, I hope, who are listening in, and through all the different roles of people that we bring into the podcast, it's giving them a sense of opportunities that are out there, and also demonstrating what I know I was always told, which is like, X% of the college undergraduates are going to be in jobs in 10 years that don't exist today. And so like I could see what you're doing with like this digital community, like that would definitely have not existed so many years ago. So, going through school and being someone who's like, oh, I don't know what I want to do. Do I want to do computer science? Do I want to do psychology? And what, the pressure of parents being like, well, what are you going to actually do with that? And just like, I don't know. It hasn't been invented yet. And then even adding into that, like
contrarian, like we don't know if it's going to be invented yet. So all we can do is just kind of figure out what our strengths are, build those strengths up, and it's going to be an evolution. And you're going to, nobody wants to be a what do you call it, a buggy whip? Nobody's going to study to be a buggy whip, but there's probably some skills there that the buggy whip actually was able to transition into. And we, humans
and they became
great
baseball players.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like as humans, like we're great at predicting things, except for the future. So I think as long as we just have a little bit of humility about it,
Yeah. That's why I loved doing college and career counseling, and I actually still do it randomly on the side, just with friends, family, and sometimes random strangers, like in like Lyft rides. When I was doing it a little bit more often before, but. And the same thing, right? I came from being a college and career counselor, and I still somehow ended up in tech. And that was a huge random surprise to my parents, and that was something that I wanted to get across to them too. Is like, as human beings, we're so multifaceted. We have so many different skills that don't just need to live in any one industry or one place. Like I feel like we all have very transferable skills, but I think it's a matter of connecting to people to really connect the dots and understand, like, what is it that I do today that actually can go into the tech industry. And so something else that I do at Splunk is I'm a employee resource group leader. So I actually co-founded and I co-chair the Philippines ERG at Splunk, which is for the Filipino community of Splunkers within the company. And when I remember when we maybe like 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I only knew about like 4 or 5 like Filipinos, and now we have over 80 Filipinos in the community, and so many people have mentioned to us like, oh, this is the first company I've ever worked at, and I've worked, they've been working for like 10, 20 years in the industry, and like this is the first time there's been an employee resource group for my community and for my identity, and it really, really means a lot. And I brought all of that from my time at Cal, where I was doing student community building and organizing. But it was primarily around, making sure there were underrepresented groups that understood the opportunities that were out there that they might not otherwise be exposed to. So something that we do with the ERG is we actually do outreaches to Filipino university students to talk to them about jobs in tech, because we would love to be able to see more folks like ourselves in the industry, because we're not actually as well represented. And so we actually spoke at UC Berkeley back in March to about like 20 or so students from all different types of majors. But we really wanted them to understand that, like, hey, you're all doing some really cool stuff. Like when I was at Berkeley, I didn't realize that I was doing program management, project management, budgeting, event planning, like all these things I didn't realize, like, oh, those are real skills for real jobs that are out there. But I didn't have a mentor or someone that was telling me like, hey, you can use those for all these different industries. Like I just thought, oh, I'm helping students get into college, therefore I can only stick in education. Mm-hmm. But realizing like, oh, wow, I have these other skills that actually can work in tech and any other areas that need my skill set.
That's super important. I mean, because we have these perceptions that are built up over time that they often come from outside influences, and when you're young, you might not know better. You might just take that as the given, and having somebody else with another perspective is super important.
Yeah,
so, very commendable.
Hal says that I'm bad at segues, so I'm gonna make a very
stick to that reputation.
I'm gonna stick to that. I want to rewind, and I want to just touch on like what is the nature of answers, and the other thing that I want to make sure that we cover is like how does one start a user group? Because I think that there could be misconceptions like, someone who works at Splunk has to start the user group, or that being a misconception, or like I know when I've talked with a lot of people new to Splunk, there's a lot of hesitation about like, I can't ask that on the community because like I don't really know what I'm doing yet.
It's a dumb question, that kind of thing.
Are you saying my question is a dumb question with my bad segue? Yeah, exactly.
No, I didn't know if that's what you were getting at.
Yeah, and we just haven't. We've been talking kind of about community as a whole, but I think understanding like what is the nature or pattern of like answers, because it's such an incredible resource. I think it would be good for us to discuss that.
Yeah, I think it's I took an advanced online community management workshop end of 2019, and it's very interesting to kind of hear about like these kind of the general trends and rules that you kind of see with online communities, especially with forums. There's this 99-1 rule where typically you see 90% of your community members as lurkers, or people that are just, they're there, they're logged in, or sometimes it's anonymous. They come in from
watching you.
Yeah, exactly. And, they're just like, they don't need to post anything. Like there's already a lot of awesome existing content that lives in the community space. And so oftentimes people never have to ask anything. They're just like,
but they're still considered an act. Like the point being, they're still an active user. They're still getting enrichment out of the platform. Yeah. It's not like someone who's just passing through.
Right. And so, and then there's so that's about 90% of folks. And then there's 9% of folks who contribute here and there, right? They ask questions. They're not afraid to ask certain questions, or if they feel confident in a certain area, they're like, oh, cool, I think I can answer this. So a lot of people start dipping into that 9% realm because, cool, I've been in this community for like 1 to 2 years. I've gotten a lot of great information out of it. I've used Splunk in my organization for pretty, and I'm pretty confident within. I can actually share my knowledge now with other people, just like other people in the community have done for me. And then there's 1%, and that's typically where you see the Splunk Trust members, right? Where they live and breathe community, and they're pretty active, and that's not just in Splunk Answers, but they're leaders of user groups or speaking at user groups, or they are on Slack constantly triaging questions and answering them. And so that's kind of, for my job as a community manager, I was like, how did someone get from point A as a lurker to point B as some of this a 1% top contributor, and how do we build that excitement and growth for wanting to help out and contribute to the community?
What have you found to be the secret sauce for that?
I don't think I think everyone has very different stories from the ones that I have spoken to. Like one of them, our number one contributor on the community site, his name is Somesh Soni. Some people think he's a robot because they were just like, I don't understand how he's able to answer some questions like so quickly and so efficiently, and yet so very, very, and in a very just very clear and concise way. And when I remember I did a little interview with him.
Username?
Some Sony 2, so SOMESONI number 2, and I did a little interview and actually did a blog post about him because he was the only user in the old platform to break 100,000 karma points, and yeah. Yeah, I just asked him a couple questions, kind of like a little interview, and like, why is it that you got so engaged in the community? And for him, he honestly saw it as a playground for himself. Like he thought, like, yes, he uses Splunk in his organization within this very specific industry, but there's so many other people out there that are using Splunk for so many different things. And he's like, how can I get some experience in other industries and helping them solve different Splunk problems without actually working for these companies? And so that's where he saw Splunk Answers as this opportunity to, like, cool, this person from the healthcare industry, this person from the public sector, and these other folks are asking all these different questions, trying to solve Splunk problems, and he was helping them answer them. And so he treated it as like a training ground, actually, like for himself to figure out how he can solve interesting use cases that he might not otherwise be exposed to just within his own organization.
I wonder in terms of that secret formula for getting someone to become that 1%. Something that jumps out in my mind is the positivity, because I know, like, it takes confidence to feel like you have the chutzpah to go and answer other people's questions. You might know the answer and you'll give a timid reply like, oh, I think it's documented here, or I think you're talking about this feature. And then one thing that I think has been really incredible is that our platforms have maintained this sense of positivity. So even when there was like downvote functionality and it was really discouraged, it was more about like, no, if you agree, like give kudos, give an upvote, whatever. And I think as someone submitting questions, when you start to see those things come in and you're like, oh, hey, that builds my confidence. Okay, maybe I'll try it again. And it's like a positive reinforcement for it.
Yeah, and definitely I think I felt like, I mean, honestly, I feel going into my first job in community management, I felt pretty spoiled jumping into the Splunk community, just because I've been to community management conferences and I've met community managers for different industries and different companies, and also just like other tech companies. And for some other people, it's like pulling teeth to get people to engage, or just the vibes generally might like lean more towards the negative in some of theirs. And I feel pretty fortunate that like we have a lot of good eggs in the Splunk community that are just such champions for the culture, and making sure things are staying positive and on course with the tone and that's been set. And really, it's because that was already there. It's like, cool, let's make sure that we continue to cultivate that and maintain that. And so, what are processes and things that we can do as a community team to make sure that that continues to thrive? So,
jumping back, what does it take to start a new user group?
So the thing is, there wasn't a user groups manager for a very long time. So there was a time where it was only myself and Jason Hupka trying to do 5 people's jobs. And
again, we're just naming the same 5 people that work at the company.
and as I remember, like being so stressed out because I was like, oh my gosh, there's this uptick in people wanting to start user groups, but I'm like, Answers is like 110%.
I thought you were insinuating Jason Hupka makes you stressed out.
No. But it's just like he was also looking over, Splunk Trust program, and it was just too much for us to juggle as a, just between us 2 only full-time folks on the community team. But last year, Dylan Steele, he's the head of corporate messaging and community for Splunk. He took over the community team beginning of 2019, and honestly, he was a godsend for the community. We would not be where we are today with these new technology investments if Dylan wasn't there helping to advocate for us and the leadership level to make sure that, hey, community is important. We should not be leaving them behind. Let's make sure we put our investments into the people that are the reason for the success of our organization over the years. And so I remember him asking me, like, I have some funding we were hiring for a community director at the time. And he's like, hey, I happen to get funds for a new position. What do you think is important? I'm like, user groups. Please, let's get a user groups focused person, because we're doing, the user groups land a disservice because they're people are like reaching out and they really want to start up new user groups. They want to continue to build community in their local areas, but we just don't have the bandwidth to do it with just myself and Jason. And so Renee Woods was hired on spring of last year, and now she's like really like fully ramping things up now, since they moved over to the new Bevy platform, which is why within the past 2 weeks there have been 9 new user groups. She's setting up new user group training programs, so there's a whole onboarding process, and also going through follow-up check-ins to kind of see like, 1 month after you started your user group, 2 months after, like, how are you doing, where do you need support.
Wow.
And then hopefully also building a network of support amongst all the user group leaders around the world, so we can share resources with each other. If there are speakers that have said, I'm open to speaking at other user groups where other ones are struggling always to find a speaker, there's a lot of great information to be shared and best practices amongst folks trying to lead up those groups. And so to start a new user group now, folks just need to reach out to Renee Woods, just emailing usergroups@splunk.com.
One word, no dash.
Yeah. And so she receives those emails, and then so she can get them, all the initial information that they need in terms of what are the expectations, the commitment, what support is going to be offered from the Splunk side, and then also being able to connect with other user group leaders in the spaces that they have.
Not to correct you, but I did want to point out that if you go to the community website and then you click on user groups, you will see a become a leader link. Ooh. And that takes you to a form, which I'll bet the form goes straight to her.
Yes. Thank you for pointing that out, because I was like, I haven't had to apply to be a user group leader myself since this program started, since I was already on it.
Let's save her email by all means. She's the person. So, let's have people use that process.
And one of the things that I love about the user groups is like, it always makes me think of like FUBU, like for us, by us. Like when I was a customer, at least, it was like, come to the user group. And I was like, I don't need to go to another corporate conference or whatever, like a sales pitch thing. And people were like, no. This is the opposite. Yeah. This is like Splunk employees.
We would fail if that was.
Stay outside. Like this is customers talking to customers and trying to help each other out without any sort of pressure or feeling of like, Big Brother hanging over. Not that I even think our company has that type of feeling, but it's a really cool thing to feel like, hey, the kids are running the house.
Yeah, and that's how the thing with user groups is, ideally they should be completely run and led by users. But in some cases it is helpful to, at least maybe at the start, to get some support from local Splunkers that are there to say, especially if they're account reps, it's like they know other customers that are in the region. It's like, hey, FYI, there's a new user group that's started up in the area, just to at least build awareness around things. But we do have pretty strict rules around how Splunk employees should be engaging with any community spaces, because people go to community for the purpose of getting help and support from other peers, not to be sold to. Like it's, and that's really what we try to keep sacred amongst our community programs is, it should feel like a community. It shouldn't feel like a place for sales and marketing.
And then the other one was on answers. So if anyone out there is encouraged to just go to community.splunk.com and they can find the means to just post on the questions and answers forum. I used to have some stats. I think I worked with you on a couple of years ago where we found that like the 50th percentile time for something to be answered was 2 hours. So in other words, if you posted any question, you were likely, you had an average or half of your chances, half the time, median versus average, you'd get an answer within 2 hours. And I used to tell other people, like, dude, 2 hours is much faster than waiting for me to respond to an email from you. And then I think it was like the highest and like the 95th percentile was like 24 hours. And I was like, even that a day is like, that's incredible.
Yeah, and we're going through, actually, now that we're on new platform, we're really thinking through, like, cool, what are all the possibilities of the different metrics and data that we can gather that are really interesting, and how do we use that to measure? One is like health of the community, but also some other things that are impactful for us as a team and also for the organization. And so we actually are, the past week and also going into the next couple of weeks, we're doing metrics exercises as a team to kind of just pie in the sky. What are all the questions that we could ask of the data that we have, and what answers would we like to get out of that? And then really digging into all the different areas where we can answer those and report on those things. So it's exciting. Like, we haven't really had the luxury of being able to do that, I feel like, with previous tools. So I think with this, it's I'm really excited to see what we're gonna be able to gather in the months to come.
So we just have a couple minutes left here. But you kind of position this into an interesting, looking forward, like, here's what is coming next is we're going to look at the data and do things like that. I realize there's limits to what we can say about what's forthcoming until things actually happen. But is there anything that is appropriate to share? Anything you're excited about coming up? I think I mentioned it earlier, I'm really excited that we're going to be able to connect the experience between the community site and the user groups platform. I feel like it's been a long time coming just to be able to have a more seamless experience for users to discover new user groups and also to continue to engage with members of the user groups that they're a part of outside of just of the official user group meetings. So we have some planned integrations in the pipeline for the next several months with the Coros site that I'm hoping is going to make for a much better experience for our users. And since the launch of community.splunk.com, we have gotten a lot of feedback from folks, and that's fine. Like, I was honestly really sad, just like with some of the harsh critique that was coming in, but I'm like, you know what? Feedback it's a gift. It's good. We wanted to launch the site for the users, and if they are unhappy with certain elements of the site, then we should listen. It also means, like, they have high expectations, and people don't give feedback if they think no one's going to do anything with it. So that's sort of a compliment in a way to your team that, like, I'm going to say this because I know you'll do something about it.
Yeah. And so, we all their feedback, areas that obviously seem way more important to users than others. It's helping us prioritize with the UX team at the vendor of, like, hey, these are the top 10 things that are top of mind for folks. And so we're trying to set up a couple sprints with them to be able to crank through these and to make these user experience improvements that I think will make a big difference in how people engage with and can use the site. So
awesome.
Bunch of UX improvements prioritized based on user feedback. Some future integrations, especially the one with the user group site, I think are going to be really key.
Wow. Well, that's great.
There's something I do on one of my other podcasts, Birch, and we had these.
He loves to brag about all the other podcasts he does.
We had this trademark question, and it would be like something we'd ask guests for fun, and just see
consistent, same question.
Exactly.
Every guest gets it.
So it just hit me. Well, I mean, it just hit me like I was just thinking about it right now.
Yeah.
I've got two of them that I'm thinking of. The first one would be, what is your? We wouldn't do two of every time. This is like an iterative process. Okay, Patrick.
Yes.
What's your favorite SPL command?
Ooh.
That's tough. It's because it's the thing I also haven't really used.
Do you want me to
in the past?
Do you want me to kill time and I'll tell mine?
Honestly, I think stats. I think stats is my favorite one. I think it's because it's so for seemingly so simple, right? People are like, oh, stats, it's like the first thing that you learn. Mm-hmm. But really, I feel like that's the bread and butter of most Splunk searches that exist out there. And there's a lot of great material out there from experts like Nick Mealy and Sumesh Soni out there on just all the things that you can do with stats over all these other commands that are out there, right? So there's things like append and join are things that are a lot more resource intensive. And again, I learned all these things from reading Splunk Answers. This is, again, it's not like I use it that much.
If myself. I had a nickel for the number of times that I told people, hey, instead of doing dedupe and then table, why not use stats? Yeah. The same kind of that was the first command that came to my head when Hal asked that, and it was exactly what you explained. It's like the dark horse of commands with the amount of improvements it can do on your search and like really just make a lot of those other commands work a lot better.
You know what we need to do now is we need to lead with this type of discussion for a future podcast. So we can get this all out in the open.
Yeah. I think it'd be great.
All right. Well, that worked out well.
Yeah.
Thankfully, awesome. I knew at least one SPL command.
You said the one command you know.
So I also like T-stats too. I also like T-stats as well.
Don't get me started on the syntax.
You are a SQL hater?
We'll save it for next time.
Okay. Hey, Patrick, thanks a lot for giving us some time and speaking with us. This has been pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, everyone, and happy splunking.